Ditch this with the craziest coincidence that has happened to you. I'll go first. So when my grandmother died, my dad and my siblings and I all went to her house to look through all her stuff. And when I was going through one of her drawers, I found this beautiful ruby earring that didn't have a match. And I was like, hey guys, do you mind if I keep this? It doesn't have a match. And they were like, sure. So I kept it as like a keepsake for my grandmother. Fast forward to when my husband and I first started dating, we were talking about how we had both lost our grandmothers. And he was saying that he had kept an earring of hers, a single earring. And I was like, that's really weird and random because I kept a single earring from my grandmother. And so we ended up going and finding our separate earrings and showing them to each other, and they were a pair. That isn't a true story, but wouldn't that be crazy if that had happened?
Since I was a kid, my favorite numbers have been 5 and 3. I'm talking about emails, passwords, journals. I would just see that number everywhere. And I didn't really think much of it growing up. Everyone has a favorite number. I just had 2. So tell me how my daughter was born on March 5th, 3:05 at 5:35 p.m. It still blows my mind. Coincidence or fate?
So to this day, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. I was 12 years old and I was on visitation with my mom. I was spending the day with my friend and I decided that I was going to spend the night. And all day, she kept complaining about side pains and she just chalked it up to like stomach pains. And it was about, I don't know, midnight, and she woke up and was like screaming in pain. And so we woke her mom up, and her mom did what any mom would do, and we took her to the emergency room. So we drive the 20 minutes into the hospital, we go to the emergency room, and we're waiting in the waiting room. So remember, it's like 1 a.m., right? We're sitting there, and the sliding doors open up. I'm 12 years old, I'm nosy, so I look over. And in that door walks my dad, my aunt, and my uncle. We make eye contact, we look at each other, and we're like, what's happening? And that's the day I find out that not only my friend has appendicitis, but my grandfather died.
I've been waiting for this one. So me and my most precious boyfriend met on Bumble about 1.5 years ago here in Texas. He grew up in Florida and moved to Texas about 3.5 years ago for work. I've grown up here. Later, we found out that he grew up in the same city that my grandparents in Florida live. And his mom used to work in the car industry, and my granddad is well known in the car industry in this city. So my dad was like, you have to ask your mom. I'm sure she knows Maddie's granddad. So Michael goes home and asks his mom, hey, do you know Maddie's granddad? Insert his name. And she was like, how do you know him? I worked for him for 15 years. So not only did Michael's mom work for my granddad years ago, there's this. This is my granddad. That is Michael's mom. And that is Michael when he's about 2. What are the chances that this little Florida boy who knew my granddad would grow up to meet and fall in love with me in Texas?
I gotta get one for this one. So about 4 years ago, me and my friends, we all did choir rehearsal together, and we did it in Oakland, California. Now that's nothing against Oakland, but y'all know how it can be. Anyways, choir rehearsal is over, so we go to this Chinese food place right down the street from where we were rehearsing. And we all order our food. It's me, my 2 friends, and then their moms. So we had all ordered our food, and we were about to leave, but then one of my friend's mom goes, hey, wait a minute, I want some chicken wings. So then right before we were about to leave, we turned around like, okay, fine, let's get her some chicken wings. And then a guy who was right behind us, he left. And literally like 3 seconds after he steps out the door, we hear gunshots. Some random dudes pulled up and robbed him at gunpoint and ended up shooting him. In the nuts, too. Oof. So since my friend's mom ordered chicken wings, we didn't get shot or robbed. That's pretty crazy.
Okay, so this is something that happened while I was still in high school, but up until today I still think it's absolutely insane. So anyway, there was this girl, and I noticed that she had a ring on a chain around her neck. And the ring looked exactly like this one that I have over here. Only difference was, hers was gold, mine is silver. So I was like, whoa, that's so weird, I have the exact same ring. And then she begins telling me how it was the first ring that her dad ever gave her mom. And then I was like, oh my word, this is the first ring that my dad ever gave my mom. And we both kind of shocked because it was like the exact same ring, only hers was gold and mine was silver. So I went home that day and I was telling my mom about this insane coincidence. And then my mom tells me, that's not the ring. I'm like, what? And then my mom opens the cupboard and shows me the first ring that my dad ever gave my mom. And it was the exact same ring as this. Only in gold.
I am from Perth in Scotland, and when I was about 22, 23, I was living in Sydney in Australia, 10,500 miles away from home, and I went for a job interview. I turned up, I was trying to be all professional, all that crap. Turned up, sat down, and the woman who was interviewing me looked at me a bit funny. Instantly my anxiety was like, she hates you should probably leave. And then she said in a broad Scottish accent, "Are you Willie Robertson's wee sister?" Which I am, so I was like, yes. And it turns out she was in his class at school, so they'd spent 13-14 years at school together. Her parents lived about 100 yards away from my parents back home. It was just far out. We didn't talk about the job in the slightest. We just chatted about home, and then quite soon after that I came home because I missed it.
Okay, so I don't talk about this a lot, especially on social media nor TikTok, but I am a survivor of Route 91, the Las Vegas mass shootings. That day that the shooting happened, my friends and I, every single day, we were up front on the gate right by the stage. That day I just wasn't feeling well, and I said I needed to walk away for a minute, maybe get some water, take care of myself and stuff. I didn't try to re-enter the venue till later, and the shootings was actually just starting to happen. We all got separated. We were all in different places. I mean, it was crazy. I felt guilty, and I told my friends I felt guilty for leaving them, that we should have all been together when it happened. And they told me, no, don't feel guilty, because the girl that stepped into your spot got shot. At the time, they didn't know if she made it or not. The one was pretty sure she didn't make it. I later on found out the name of that girl that stepped into my spot. I'm not going to say her name out of respect, but we have the same birthday.
Okay, so I made friends with a worker at a marina, and I used to buy a couple extra beer at closing time because the marina and the bar closed at the same time. So she'd come out there and drink a few beers with me. Well, one night I was out there, me and her were smoking, and I was telling her how beautiful the new bartender was. She's like, "Oh, you talking about Tatum?" I was like, "Yeah, that's her. She's gorgeous." She's like, "That's my daughter." So I got embarrassed, walked back to the bar and started drinking. Well, a couple hours later, I was with the manager of the bar outside smoking, Gary. And I was telling him what had happened. It's like, man, I was talking about it, and turns out it's her daughter. He's like, "You talking about Lee and Tatum?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "That's my wife and my daughter." So twice in the same night. Now, me and her have been together almost 4 years. We have a child. Been together ever since.
So there was a friend of mine who we met in nursery school when I was 4. She was in a lot of my classes in elementary school. She sat in front of me in homeroom all through high school because her name was right before mine in the alphabet. And on June 27th, 1991, she died in a car accident. 6/27/91. And it was really hard for me, obviously, as it would be for any 17-year-old who lost somebody who they've known their whole life. And the number 27, 6/27, has stuck with me ever since. The number 27 keeps reappearing in my life. I worked on 27th Street. When I get like a coat check ticket, it'll be 27, and I think of her every single time. And when our daughter was born, when we were adopting her, we rushed to the hospital. We drove for 12 hours trying to get to the hospital in time for when she was being born. And as soon as we pulled into the parking lot, I noticed on the clock it said 6/27, and I thought, that's a good sign. When we get into the hospital, it turns out that is the minute that my daughter was born. Felt like, what are the chances of that? It was a few hours where we couldn't see our daughter yet. So they said, why don't you go get some food and come back in a few hours? And when we went to a restaurant, an Olive Garden of all places, I sat down at the table, and there was a dime on the table, and I picked it up, and it was 1991 on the dime. 6/27/91. Could be a crazy coincidence, but I can't help but feel like it was her somehow looking out for me. And yeah, here we are, 30 years ago today, 6/27/91. And I think about her still all the time, and I thank her for every time she sends the number 27 my way.